Hello, I am back and I am going to read to you chapter 11, which is rather a short chapter. It covers the years 1977 to 1978. It's Behind Closed Doors, the tragic untold story of the Duchess of Windsor. I'm reading it aloud because I just really feel it's a very important part of history for anybody that is interested. The whole Duke and Duchess of Windsor story is very fascinating, particularly for that time. And we know their story, but as we all know, when a spouse dies, the life of a widow completely changes. And in the case of the Duchess of Windsor, she um, she didn't really have any children. She didn't have any relatives. I mean, I've read a lot of books on the royal family, and there were moments, where they would have lunch or dinner with the Duke and Duchess of Kent, because Prince George, the Duke of Kent, when he was alive, they were very close, Prince Edward and um, Prince George. They were very, very close brothers. But then he died in 1942 from the war, and there was still a cordialness. It's not really publicized, but there was a cordialness, but it was very distant. And the Duchess had a lot of friends. She entertained a lot. She was a wonderful hostess. She made everybody feel welcome at her parties, and she was just a wonderful hostess. Okay, something's going on with my computer. Why would it say my laptop is low on battery? Okay. So, anyways, so I'm going to start reading this chapter so that it's a very short chapter. Blum closes in 1977 and 1978. Joanna Schultz was still working in the house, but she now only saw the Duchess for 10 minutes each day. At times specified by the nurses, she found that the Duchess was frequently sedated. There was no chance for Joanna to have proper conversation with her. In September, there had been another outburst of animosity between the two nurses then in place, due to a large measure to long hours they had worked without a break. Their hours were rearranged, and they were both kept in. Blume was becoming increasingly irritable. She told Miss Schultz that she preferred to get news of the Duchess from someone other than her, since she was always told that the Duchess was fine. Blum complained that there were still too many staff employed and was toying with the menacing threat of putting the Duchess into a maison de santé. Presently, Maitre Blum took action to secure final power. Worn down by the machinations going on around her, Miss Schultz was preparing to leave for a holiday in America. Blum told her that the postman could not deliver any registered letters until a new power of attorney was in place. She gave a particular example: the Christmas card that the Queen sent the Duchess each year. This always arrived by registered post. It does seem an odd example, since surely anyone at the house could have signed for it when the postman rang the bell. But this was to be a power of attorney that would cover all the lawyer's past and future misdeeds. Miss Schultz was told that she would not be allowed to leave until the new power of attorney was in place. In October, Blum came to the house with a notary. In October, Blum came to the house with a notary, and his clerk was bearing the relevant power of attorney document. Miss Schultz had to give them tea in her office, and the notary said to Blum, "Mater, your wishes are my orders." Blum sent the clerk up to the Duchess's room with Miss Schultz while she hovered outside the bedroom door. The notary stayed downstairs in the office. There was by now no question of the Duchess signing any documents. since her hands were twisted with arthritis. The clerk was there on the pretext of gaining her verbal assent. The clerk began to read the document in French. Not surprisingly, the Duchess could not understand the legal language. She stopped him and asked him if he would mind translating this document into English. This clerk pretended that his English was not up to that and obliged Miss Schutz to inform the Duchess that it merely confirmed existing arrangements. The Duchess said something like, "Oh, all right," at which point the clerk left the room and told Maitre that all was well. Blum had what she wanted. In October 1977, Blum's plans were in place. She was ready for the Duchess to die. Photographs of the salon and the beautiful objects could be sent to Connaissance d'Arts. An article should be written, preferably to Excel de Gagnon. Objects could be given to museums, but if they were, she insisted that it was on condition that they were described as a gift of Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Windsor, to the museums of France. An explanatory note was to be appended explaining that the high legal authority in the United Kingdom had confirmed that no letters patent could confer or withdraw the title of HRH, which was the Duke's right by birth. No letters patent could withdraw the title of HRH, which was the Duke's right by birth and the Duchess's by marriage. In support of this, Blum asked for copies of tables of precedence from the Duchess's house, which she thought was important. Miss Schutz left for her month's holiday in America on the 5th of October and returned in early November to find the atmosphere a little better. But she was able to report to Cummings, "I'm happy to tell you that I found the Duchess was in good shape on my return, and I feel Her Royal Highness is strong enough to cope with the coming winter." By November, Blum's attitude to Miss Schutz was becoming increasingly curt and disagreeable. She queried the arrival of Dr. Antonucci, and in particular his charges and the arrangements for a proposed visit. At the end of the particular sinister letter, Blum pointed out that she was missing nothing when the Duchess's interests were involved and was aware of what she, Blum, was told and what she was not told. Sometimes, she said, she liked to appear to be deaf or as an old dotard, but only when it suited her. Miss Schutz then had to write to Dr. Antonucci asking him to inform Dr. Thinn when he was arriving. Mindful of Thinn's hurt feelings when Antonucci had appeared without warning 6 months earlier, she also told him he would have to come in at his own expense and that he could not house him in the Duchess's house, since the conditions here are different and we had to close the guest room on the first floor. This was in the interest of sidelining Antonucci. On the 22nd of November, Miss Schutz wrote to Blum, confirming that she and Monsignor Martin had destroyed a great number of papers consigned to them by Amiguet on his last visit to Paris, on which occasion he had ordered their immediate destruction. She did not know their precise contents. There remained other papers. John Utter had retrieved a collection of documents from Buckingham Palace. These and other papers of the Duke's and various office papers, she pointed out, Blume had removed on a number of occasions, always at a time when Joanna was away. All she knew for certain was that she had been told frequently that these were not her concern, and presumably for that reason, Blum had not felt the need to give her an inventory of what had been taken. She also said that Amiguet had asked her to burn a number of documents, but has not asked her to make a list of these. London Weekend Television had sought permission to use the abdication speech in a program. Blum said that this was not the sort of thing they authorized. At the end of the month, the Duchess was sent to the American hospital with a fever. Dr. Thinn thought she was going to die. He arrived unannounced at the house at 3 a.m. in search of a dossier he needed. When the Duchess once again did not die, he wanted to return her home on the 2nd of December. But neither the Duchess's nurse nor the nurse at the hospital thought this was a good idea. The problem was, who was to make of this decision? Miss Schultz finally called the night nurse, Elvira Guzin, and asked her to call Dr. Thinn, who agreed to keep the Duchess in hospital a few days longer. Robin Bear was expected for a meeting with Dr. Thinn on 12 December. Blum also went to the hospital and told the nurses to communicate directly with Dr. Thinn on these matters. Blum maintained that Dr. Antonucci always congratulated Dr. Thinn on what he was doing for the Duchess and stressed her confidence in Professor Mercadier, who was still overseeing the Duchess while she was in the American hospital. The Duchess returned home, and Amiguet spent 3 days in Paris in the middle of December in connection with her affairs. He was not supposed to see the Duchess, but one morning the nurse suddenly came down and asked him to come upstairs quickly. The Duchess was well rested and was just able to wish him a good trip. Nevertheless, Amiguet concluded it was still very sad. Meanwhile, the Duchess's Mercury car was sold because she was no longer able to use it. The cooking arrangements were reduced. It was noted that the house was in bad repair. Pieces of cement were falling near the front door. In January 1978, the Duchess was described as just holding her own. By February, the news was bad. Her Royal Highness's health is stable again, but there's no hope of improvement. In March, Maria reported that the night nurse had failed to close the Duchess's bedroom shutters. Lord Tennyson made his last appearance at this time, when the Duchess had her final stroke in 1977. I don't know what's going on, that my thing is not charging, so. Blume had asked him to be her liaison with the palace, to which she agreed for a while. He had tried to see the Duchess in August 1977, but at the last minute, Blume canceled the visit, causing a panic with the nurse in charge. But he did visit the Duchess in her room for the last time in early 1978. She could scarcely move, but seemed pleased to see me and even talked about a future dinner party. After that, no other callers were allowed to see the Duchess, though. Some old friends still slipped past thanks to Georges. A letter from the doctor was kept in the hall explaining that the visit were forbidden. Georges could brandish this if necessary. There was one piece of positive news: the city of Paris. It extended the lease on the house in the Bois de Boulogne, so the Duchess could stay there for the rest of her life. Okay, I'm going to move my laptop because for whatever reason, it's not getting charged up. So, excuse me. It's still not charged. Okay, now it's charging. Okay, I must have a fuse blown out. Sorry about that, people. Okay. The next few months were increasingly difficult for Miss Schultz. The situation at the house was becoming intensely stressful. Blum and Amiguet clearly wanted to get her out, and their method was to insist on a new contract when this was present to her. It did not appeal, not least because they wanted a reduction in her salary. Classic device to oust somebody. Miss Schultz refused to sign this and appealed for help to Nate Cummings. On the 25th of January, Cummings called Amiguet to inform him that she would not sign the new contract and to propose a new meeting between himself, Joanna, Amiguet, and Blum. Amiguet replied to him that there was nothing to worry about and it would all be resolved without the newspaper publicity after the Duchess died. Cummings quoted Amiguet as saying that he was Joanna's friend and wished to be impartially helpful. At that point, Amiguet still thought Blum was a very smart woman. On the 23rd of February, Joanna left for Canada, informing Blum that she thought the Duchess's condition was stable, and she did not anticipate any problems in her absence. When she returned on the 13th of March, she found the Duchess could no longer speak to her. By this time, the Duchess was crippled with deformatory rheumatism. Her hands were so twisted that for a time they were bound in an attempt to straighten them. Later, they placed cotton wool under her fingers to prevent them from digging into her palms. Her legs were likewise twisted. She could do nothing. Joanna realized that her position as secretary was under threat. She told Nate Cummings that her salary had not been reduced, but that when she tried to call Amiguette, she was instructed to call Blum. She was planning a few days off early in March with Maitre Blum's permission. With all the tensions at the house, her health was suffering and she lost 8 pounds. The Duchess almost ceased to exist as a person. She could still communicate, speak occasionally, but she could hardly move without assistance, being turned to the right and left, and moved from her bed to a chair or couch and then back again. Miss Schutt's negotiations with Blum and Amiguette. They were then on a world cruise aboard the Queen Elizabeth II, and they were making no progress. Amiguette could not attend to Joanna's problems since he was traveling on the high seas. I have received already 2 postcards from Miss Amiguette. Never any money in Switzerland. Anyhow, we will discuss it when you are in Paris. Thank you for proposing Charles Torrham as a lawyer, but I do not think I can pay his fees. My lawyer up to now managed that I have no problems with Blum. I call her every day as she asks me to do, and we are quite friendly, but never a word on my subject. She only comes to the house when I am not here, which means she avoids seeing me. Miss Schultz had always promised the Duke that she would stay with the Duchess until the very end, but the point came when she could no more be of assistance. The last few years have been very unpleasant. The Duchess was now ill, that she did not recognize Joanna, who was under pressure to sign the new and restricting contract, which Blum and Amiguette were confident she would unlikely do. Miss Schutz came to the point where she could no longer accept the working conditions imposed by Blum and Amiguette. Her lawyer pressed for the compensation due to her according to French law after working for 8 years. Amiguette then made the surprising proposal that she accept a check of 100,000 francs on Morgan guarantee, but not declare it. She was suspicious, working out that by that method they could always denounce her in the future. No adequate explanation was ever produced for why they offered so much money. Joanna refused their dirty money, as she called it, and told them she would continue in her job. Legally, Joanna was entitled to compensation of 45,000 francs. The moment she refused the offer, she received a registered letter dismissing her. Jeez, that's shady. She declined a reference from Blum, insulted that she was described as a secretary typist. But she did not forget that she was owed money in the Duchess's will, and that if they dared to remove her from that, they would be committing themselves. Nor was Joanna alone in being a victim of the new decisions that Blum was taking. The Duchess was no longer allowed flowers in her bedroom, an economy of about $5 a week. The night watchman was dismissed, and there was a plan to replace the nurses with less expensive gardes de malades. Dr. Thin was resisting the last proposal, and in fact, the nurses remained. Nate Cummings was not pleased to hear that Joanna had been discharged when she was needed so desperately. He hoped for a copy of the inventory so that when the Duchess died, he could protect the estate if necessary. He was anxious that there might be adverse publicity. As he put it, I hate to think that anything will be done that might be questioned. Blum put it that the reason why Joanna Schutz had to go was she was unstable and away a lot. The reason was rather different. Soon after she left, Monsignor Martin was driving Amiguette and Blum in the car together. Joanna told me that he overheard Blum say to Amiguette, "Well, at least we won't have Miss Schutz to contend with." On the 11th of April, Amiguette wrote to Nate Cummings to thank him for the copious introductions that made a long world trip in QE2. It was such a success, that trip. He added that the Paris situation was much the same, that the Duchess's health was not improving, and that Miss Schultz was leaving the matter. He added, it was in the hands of the lawyers. To this, Cummings responded that he would call Blum next time he was in Paris, and he hoped to see Duchess, even if only for a moment. He said he did not understand why Miss Schutz was leaving the Duchess's employ and felt entitled to an explanation. He had always found her trustworthy and industrious, pointing out that his involvement in the Duchess's affairs was a labor of love, and he added that he had bought a number of items from the Duchess as a sentimental gesture and always paid the price suggested by Miss Schultz. Not surprisingly, Blum, the Duchess's over-energetic lawyer, devoted her energies to external matters. In September 1977, somewhat optimistically, Guy Diarbris from TV France had written that the Duchess was inviting her to take part in a roundtable discussion on 9 May 1978 to coincide with the release of the French version of the film The Woman I Love. The letter was passed to Maitre Blum, who became excited by the idea. When Miss Schutz had returned from her skiing holiday in March 1978, she found Blum ferreting about in the Windsor's private papers. Blum claimed that she needed to prepare for the television program, and she took away 3 envelopes of 1937 press cuttings, 4 1936 scrapbooks, and a 1936 Man Ray photo of the Duchess. Among those taking part in the television discussion were Maurice Schumann, the French foreign minister, from 1969 to 1973, who had covered the Windsor wedding as a reporter. Lord Tennyson, Ambassador Henry J. Taylor, Edward Pope, and Audrey Russell, the well-known BBC commentator on royal occasions. Also, by coincidence, the niece of Fruity Metcalf, Miss Schultz got the impression that Blum was preparing a book. Ambassador Taylor wrote to the Duchess about this program. Miss Schultz replied to say that the Duchess did not know about the television program, so she had not shown her letter. She told him that Dr. Thin now forbade visitors. Her Royal Highness' state of health is stable, and she's quite lucid at the moment, but does not speak, or only very rarely. Joanna also told him she was leaving. She said, I will not take another job immediately, as I hope to come and see Her Royal Highness from time to time. But I'm afraid that this won't be possible. I feel I cannot help Her Royal Highness in her state, and it really breaks my heart to leave her. But I will always be at her disposal if Her Royal Highness needs me. At the end of April, Joanna left the Duchess's employ. The locks of the house were changed so she could no longer return there. In May 1978, Dr. Thin allowed Nate Cummings to visit the house and take a 2-minute look through the Duchess's door. It really is heartbreaking to see her sitting in a chair, propped up with pillows. In July, Cummings reported that he had phoned Georges, who had advised him that the Duchess barely spoke above whispers, but that otherwise she was much the same, though gradually becoming weaker. Cummings had then telephoned Dr. Thin, who said that no one could see the Duchess, but if he called in September, he hoped to meet me, and perhaps he could then go to the house, at least look in on the Duchess. Nate Cummings and Amiguette kept in touch. Amiguette told Cummings the latest news of the situation in Paris, pointing out that Dr. Thin was right to restrict visits to the Duchess because It was wrong to allow visitors to see her in her present condition. He addressed the departure of Miss Schultz, adding that they called in the notary republic to undertake an official check on some sales that she had organized. Cummings, worried about his purchases, thought he had proper receipts. He wondered if Maitre Blum had done anything that might be criticized. On the 1st of September, Miss Schultz clarified the position. Firstly, I told you already that I handed everything over to the Duchess's attorney, who incidentally has all the power since 1976. He was, the attorney who has the will, are at the feet of dear Suzanne. By the way, Amaget and Blum had lunch together in the Duchess's dining room on July 19th, 1977. Secondly, I always protested about the procedure of sales which were handled by Maitre Blum. Where I am concerned, I only acted on instruction from Maitre Blum. You know that she never gave me anything in writing or by Mr. Amaget, for whom I have a letter stating that I have executed all instructions given by Maitre Blum, and I am only the secretary and have no responsibility. The procedure generally was as follows. They told me what was to be sold and the amount to be paid. George then established a list of the items sold, and I added the amount paid by the purchaser. A copy of this list went to Amaget and Maitre Blum. The amounts paid to me, I handed to the bank with proper receipts and the amounts paid to Blum or Amaget. I got a statement from Amaget saying how much he received. All this has been checked by the banking expert, controlling the accounts each year, and I have the letters from him to the Duchess saying the accounts were in order. What they are up to now, I do not know. They can do anything or say anything, and who can prove them to the contrary? So that is the end of chapter 11. And this is in the book Behind Closed Doors, The Tragic Untold Story of the Duchess of Windsor, written by Hugo Vickers. I'm going to go on and read the next chapter, and that is Blume on the Attack. I'm going to read that in a separate episode, and this is between 1978 and 1979. And it takes time to read through these, but when I read them in a separate episode, it's a lot easier to digest. So I'm just gonna again show you the book Behind Closed Doors, The Tragic Untold Story of the Duchess of Windsor. It's written by Hugo Vickers. He was very fascinated and interested in the Duchess of Windsor and the Windsor family. He's been following them since he was in university. He writes very well. He tells a very good story. He's a very good author and he's a very ethical writer. And I just think he gives a very interesting perspective. You can find this book on Amazon.com. It cost me $30. And eventually it might be read on Audible, but I cannot find it on Audible right now. So I'm reading it out loud because I think it's such an important part of history. And the story of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor is very fascinating. So, anyways, I will catch you in the next episode. Thank you all for listening. And check this book out, Behind Closed Doors, The Tragic Untold Story of the Duchess of Windsor by Hugo Vickers. It's a very interesting book. Thank you.